The days after I froze the account felt surreal. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't responding to texts and calls about money. The pressure that had been constant, the weight of my family's expectations, finally lifted. But with it came a deep sense of uncertainty, a feeling of dread as I realized what I had set in motion. The calm I'd hoped for was not coming. Instead, a storm was brewing and I was at the center of it. It started with my mom. She's never been one to shy away from confrontation, especially when she feels entitled to something. And this time, she was not about to let me get away with freezing the account without a fight. "Why would you do this?" Her voice was tight, strained, the way it always sounded when she was trying to hold back her anger. "I've been there for you your whole life. I've supported you. And now, you're doing this to me." I took a deep breath before responding, trying to steady the storm of emotions swirling inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything: the years of feeling used, the constant sacrifices, the anger I'd buried and ignored for too long. But I couldn't let her see that. "Not yet. Mom, you've been there for me, yes. But this is different. I've given everything I have to help out, and now it's just too much. You can't just keep taking from me." Her response was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You don't understand. This is your sister's wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Do you really expect me to let her suffer just because you're upset about something so trivial?" Trivial? The word hit me like a slap. "You're asking me to pay for her wedding like I'm some kind of ATM. And all this time, you've made me feel like it's my responsibility to foot the bill for everything, every mistake, every choice, every whim she has. I've had enough." For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. It felt like a long time, but in truth, it was only a few seconds. I could practically hear her processing what I'd said, trying to find the right words to manipulate me back into line. "You're being unreasonable," she finally said. "I'm your mother. Don't you care about your family? Don't you want to see your sister happy on her big day?" "I want to see my sister happy," I said, my voice cold. "But not at the cost of my happiness. Not at the cost of my future. This is the last time I'm doing this for her. I've been more than generous. You both have taken advantage of me for far too long." I ended the call before she could say anything else. I knew she'd try to guilt-trip me, to make me feel like I was the villain in all of this. That's how it always worked. But I was done playing that game. I was done being the one who cleaned up their mess. The days following were filled with a sense of tension. The messages came flooding in: texts, emails, and even letters, all with the same demands. Why did I freeze the account? What was I thinking? This is for Emma's wedding. She needs this. But it wasn't just my mom. Emma, too, started contacting me, demanding answers. "Why did you freeze the account?" she asked one morning, her tone accusing, as if I had done something wrong. "I told you I needed that money. Mom said you'd come through for me." I let out a small sigh, my fingers tightening around my phone. It wasn't just the money anymore, it was everything about this situation that had built up over the years. The entitlement, the manipulation, the way Emma had always expected me to drop everything for her without ever considering my feelings or needs. "I'm not funding your wedding, Emma," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Not this time. I'm tired of being expected to fix everything. I've given you enough." Her silence spoke volumes, and when she finally responded, the words felt calculated, as if she were weighing each one for maximum effect. "You know, I thought we were close. I thought you were my sister, but I guess I was wrong." I didn't know what I expected her to say, but it certainly wasn't that. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting one. Had I done the right thing? Could I have handled this differently? But then I remembered the countless times Emma had taken advantage of me, the countless times she had crossed boundaries because she knew I would forgive her. "Emma," I began, my voice firm, "it's not about being close or not. It's about respect. And you've never respected me." She didn't reply. The next few days were a whirlwind of messages, calls, and increasingly desperate pleas. My mom tried everything, from guilt to anger, trying to convince me to unfreeze the account. She told me that Emma's whole future was at risk, that I was being selfish, that I was ruining everything. but I remained firm. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself, about saying no to the years of resentment and frustration that had built up. But then, the bombshell dropped. I received a call from my lawyer. My mom had filed a lawsuit. She claimed that I was illegally withholding funds and that it was damaging the family's reputation. It was an extreme measure, but it didn't surprise me. She had always been good at using manipulation to get what she wanted. But this was a whole new level. "Are you serious?" I asked my lawyer, stunned. "She's taking me to court over money?" "She seems to think she has a case," my lawyer said, though I could hear the skepticism in his voice. "But it doesn't sound like she has much of a leg to stand on. The money is yours, and you have the right to control it." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. This was no longer just about a wedding or money. This had become a battle for my autonomy, for my control over my life and my decisions. I knew my mom was trying to force me back into the role of the provider, the one who always fixes everything. But I wasn't going to let her. As the lawsuit loomed, the tension between us grew. Each encounter, each conversation, felt like a test of how much I was willing to endure before I broke. But I knew I couldn't back down now. Not after everything that had happened. Not after everything they had taken from me. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I wasn't going to let them erase it. No matter what it cost. No matter what they did. It was time to finally stand my ground. The day of the court hearing arrived, and with it, an overwhelming sense of finality. The moment I had been dreading and, in some ways, anticipating had come. I sat in the sterile, cold courtroom, my lawyer beside me, and across from us, my mother and her attorney. Emma, as expected, wasn't there. She never cared about the legal side of things, just the money. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze, called the session to order. She had reviewed the case and was ready to hear the arguments. My mom's attorney started with his opening statement, trying to paint a picture of a daughter betraying her family, of an act that would ruin Emma's wedding and cause irreparable harm to the family. I could almost feel the weight of his words pressing down on me as if he was trying to force me back into my old role, the one where I was just a financial backer with no say in how my life was lived. But this time, I was ready. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for myself. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I felt the eyes of the room on me, my mother's gaze full of betrayal and fury, my lawyer's a mix of support and caution. The judge waited, her pen poised, watching me closely. I knew that the next few moments would determine everything. "I've spent my whole life doing what's expected of me," I began, my voice steady but firm. "Helping my family, making sacrifices. Every time someone needed something, I was there, without question. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became the one who gave, the one who was expected to keep things afloat, without ever being asked what I needed or wanted. My mother, my sister, they took and took, but they never saw me as anything more than a source of money." I glanced at my mom as I spoke, watching her face tighten with every word. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't back down. I had to keep going. "I'm not asking for anything in return," I continued. "I've never asked for recognition or praise. But what I am asking for is respect. I'm not a machine that produces money. I'm a person, and I have limits. What happened with the wedding isn't just about the money, it's about how I've been treated my whole life. My mom made it clear, over and over, that my role in this family was to give, to support, to sacrifice. And I did it. But enough is enough." I could see the judge's eyes soften as she listened, but I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to stop until I made myself clear. "I love my family," I said, the emotion rising in my chest. "I do. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep being the one who cleans up everyone's mess." I froze the account because I needed to take control of my life. I needed to set a boundary. And I'm not going to apologize for that. For a moment, the room was completely silent. The judge looked down at her notes, her expression unreadable. My mom's face was flushed, her eyes blazing with anger and disbelief. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, couldn't believe that her daughter, her own flesh and blood, was standing up to her for the first time in years. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice calm but firm. It's clear that this situation is not just about the money. It's about a deeper issue of family dynamics, boundaries, and expectations. I'm going to take all of this into consideration, but I will not force someone to provide money they don't want to give. You have the right to say no. This court will not dictate your personal decisions. The words hit me like a wave, a mixture of relief and triumph flooding through me. I had done it. I had stood up for myself, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being manipulated. I wasn't the one who had to give in. My mom's face, however, was a study in disbelief and anger. She had expected to win. She had expected me to fold under the pressure, like I always had before. But this time, there was no bending. There was no guilt that could make me change my mind. I had found my voice, and I wasn't about to let it be silenced. As the judge adjourned the session, my mom stood up, her eyes narrowing at me. "You've made a big mistake," she hissed, but I stood my ground. This time, her words couldn't touch me. The decision was final. I had frozen the account for good, and no amount of guilt or threats could change that. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, empowerment, and a small seed of sorrow for what I had lost. But there was something else too. A sense of freedom, a sense that I had finally taken control of my own life, that I had taken a stand against the years of manipulation. I wasn't just fighting for the money anymore. I was fighting for the respect I deserved. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would my mom and sister forgive me? Would they ever understand why I did what I did? I didn't know, but I didn't need them to. For the first time, I was standing on my own, and that was enough. The days after the court hearing felt like the calm after a storm. It wasn't peaceful, not yet, but it was different. The tension that had once hung over me like a dark cloud had lifted, and in its place was a strange sense of quiet. My phone had stopped buzzing with frantic messages. My mom, for the first time in years, didn't immediately reach out with her usual manipulations. Emma's silence was almost louder than my mother's. It was as if they were both waiting for me to cave, to apologize, to fix everything the way I always did. But I didn't. I couldn't. A week later, I received a letter in the mail from my mother. It wasn't a text or an email, the typical ways she would communicate with me when she wanted something. This was a formal letter, neatly typed, the kind she would write if she wanted to make an impression. I opened it with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "My dear, I know that I've hurt you. I know that I've asked too much of you, and for that, I am sorry. You've always been there for me, for all of us, and I took that for granted. I always believed that you would always say yes, that you would always be the one who stepped up. But I see now that I've been wrong. I don't know what's going to happen next, and I don't know if I can fix what I've broken. But I want you to know that I love you. And I'm sorry for everything I put on your shoulders. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to try. I hope one day you can forgive me. Mom." The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't perfect. They didn't fix everything. But they were real. For the first time in my life, my mom was acknowledging my pain, not as a fleeting thought, but as something that had been building for years. Something that had been long overdue. I put the letter down, trying to process what it meant. Was this the beginning of something new? Or was it just another attempt to regain control? I didn't know. I wasn't sure what I wanted it to be. But there was one thing I did know. This letter, her apology, it wasn't going to change the fact that I had already made my choice. My decision to freeze the account, to stop giving in to the endless requests, was the turning point. It was the moment I decided I was worth more than being someone else's safety net. The phone call I had been dreading came a few days later. My mother wanted to talk. I hesitated, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I picked up the phone, bracing myself for another round of guilt and anger. But instead, it was different this time. She sounded tired, almost broken. "I read your letter," I said softly, my heart pounding. "And I think we need to talk about everything. Not just the money, but everything." There was a long pause, and I could almost feel her holding her breath on the other end. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been a terrible mother. You deserved so much more from me. You always have. I was wrong, and I know I can't fix it just by saying sorry. But I want to try. I want to start over. I listened to her, the words sinking in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a magical fix. But it was a beginning. A first step. And for the first time in my life, it felt like I wasn't just a bystander in my own story. I wasn't the one who had to fix everything. I wasn't the one who was constantly expected to take the fall. I don't know if I can forgive you right away, Mom, I said, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. But I'm willing to try. And I think that's the first step for both of us. We need to rebuild this. I need you to understand that I can't keep carrying this weight. It's not just about money, it's about me. It's about who I am and what I need. I understand, she said quietly. I'll do better. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. We both sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation settling between us. There were still so many things left unsaid, so much history that couldn't be erased in one phone call. But this was a start. This was progress. The next few weeks passed quietly, and the silence from Emma continued. I wasn't sure if she was still angry or if she just didn't know how to deal with me standing up for myself. But it didn't matter anymore. The days of being her financial backer, her enabler, were over. If she ever came to me for money again, I would say no. And I would mean it. As for my mother, things started to shift. Slowly, she began calling less, not to ask for help, but to check in on me. She seemed to be making an effort, trying to understand the impact of her actions. I could tell it was hard for her. She had always seen me as the reliable one, the one who would never say no. But now I had my own voice, and I was learning how to use it. Months passed, and the tension in our family started to ease. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. There were no more late-night phone calls begging for money. There were no more demands that I drop everything to fix someone else's mistakes. There were still moments when my mother would slip into old habits, but they were fewer and farther between. And when they did happen, I was ready. I had taken control of my life, and while there was still a lot of healing to be done, I knew I was no longer defined by my family's expectations. I was no longer the one who had to shoulder everything. I had learned the hard way that it was okay to say no, and sometimes saying no was the most powerful thing I could do for myself. And as for Emma, I wasn't sure what would happen with her, but I wasn't holding my breath. I had learned that I couldn't change people. I could only change how I reacted to them. And for the first time in years, I was finally learning to live for me. In the end, I realized that the most important thing wasn't the money, the wedding, or even the family drama that had plagued me for so long. It was my ability to finally stand up for myself, to draw a line in the sand and say, this is where I stop. I had spent years giving, sacrificing, and bending to the will of others, but I had forgotten the most fundamental thing of all. I mattered, too. My needs, my voice, my happiness, those things were just as important as anyone else's. The phone calls with my mom are less frequent now, but when we talk, it's different. She's trying, and so am I. There are no easy answers, no magical fixes, but I've come to understand that healing is a process, not a destination. It's the small steps, the quiet moments of understanding that make the difference. As for Emma, I've stopped trying to control her reactions or worry about her approval. She will come around in her own time, or she won't. Either way, it's no longer my responsibility. I can't keep carrying the weight of other people's choices. The only person I can change is myself. So, as I stand here now, looking back on everything, I feel a sense of peace I've never known before. I'm not perfect, and I'm still learning, but for the first time in a long while, I am living for me. And that, in itself, is enough.